Olivia Thompson, a 30-year-old woman living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, always felt her stomach churn when she saw a black person. It was as if their mere presence disturbed her sense of order. Her dislike for them wasn't subtle. She showed it everywhere. On buses, she'd wrinkle her nose and mutter rude comments. At restaurants, she'd loudly complain if a black family was seated nearby. At the train station, she'd shoot icy glares and sometimes even mutter insults under her breath. One sunny afternoon, Olivia drove home from work feeling tired and grumpy. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed a black man standing next door. He was tall, neatly dressed in a gray suit, and was unlocking the front door of the house. Olivia's face darkened. She parked her car and stormed out, her heels clicking loudly on the pavement. "Hey!" she shouted as she approached him. "What do you think you're doing here?" The man, startled, turned to face her. "Good afternoon," he said politely, smiling. "I'm just unlocking my door." "Your door?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "You mean someone else's door? What are you doing here? You don't belong in this neighborhood. People like you have no business being here, let alone owning properties." The man paused, clearly taken aback by her words. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "I'm Eric Johnson, and I just bought this house. I'm your new neighbor." Olivia crossed her arms, her face red with anger. "You bought this house? Don't make me laugh. There's no way someone like you could afford a place like this. You must be lying." Eric remained composed. "I assure you, I'm telling the truth. I closed the deal last week, and I just moved in." "Liar. You're a criminal, breaking into someone else's property." Olivia shouted, her voice loud enough to echo through the quiet street. "I'm calling the police." Before Eric could respond, Olivia had already dialed 911. She spoke quickly, her tone full of urgency. "There's a black man trying to break into a house on my street," she told the operator. "He's acting suspicious. You need to send officers right away." Eric sighed, but stayed calm. He leaned against the doorframe and waited. Within minutes, 2 police cars arrived, lights flashing. Olivia stood on her lawn, pointing dramatically toward Eric. "There he is. That's the man." The officers approached Eric cautiously. "Sir, we've received a report of a break-in," one of them said. "Can you please show us some identification and explain why you're here?" Eric nodded politely. "Of course, officers. I understand the concern." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his ID and the deed to the house. "Here's my identification, and here's proof that I'm the new owner of this property." The officers examined the documents carefully, their expressions softening. One of them turned to Olivia. "Ma'am, everything checks out. Mr. Johnson is indeed the owner of this house. There's no crime here." "What?" Olivia gasped. "That can't be right. He must have forged those papers." "Check again." The officer shook his head. "Everything is legitimate, ma'am. Please stop making false reports. It's a waste of our time." The second officer turned to Eric. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding, sir. Have a good day." As the police left, Olivia stood frozen, her face pale with disbelief and anger. Eric, however, looked at her calmly. "I hope we can move past this and be good neighbors," he said with a small smile. But Olivia didn't respond. She clenched her fists, her hatred for him burning even brighter. She stormed into her house, slamming the door behind her. Eric, on the other hand, walked into his new home, determined not to let her actions spoil his day. The next morning, Eric stepped out of his house, dressed sharply in a navy blue suit and holding a sleek leather briefcase. It was a peaceful morning, or so it seemed. Just as Eric approached his black luxury car parked in the driveway, Olivia appeared on her porch, arms crossed and eyes blazing with the same animosity as the day before. She walked briskly toward him, her slippers slapping against the pavement. "Hey, you," she called out sharply, her voice cutting through the calm morning air. Eric paused, his hand on the car door. He turned to face her, wondering if she had come to apologize for her behavior the previous evening. Perhaps she had realized her mistake and wanted to make amends. "Good morning," Eric greeted her with a polite smile. "Is everything okay?" Olivia stopped a few feet away, glaring at him. "How did you get the money to buy this house?" she demanded, skipping any pleasantries. Her tone was cold, accusatory. Eric's smile faltered, replaced by a look of surprise. "Excuse me," he asked, raising an eyebrow. "You heard me," Olivia snapped. "How can someone like you afford a house in this neighborhood? Are you a drug dealer or something? Or maybe you're running some shady scam?" Eric sighed deeply, his patience already being tested. "I've worked hard for everything I have," he replied calmly. "I own several businesses and properties in different cities. This house is just one of them." Olivia snorted in disbelief. "Yeah, right. Those papers you showed the cops yesterday, those can't be real. People like you don't belong here. You're probably renting this house and pretending to own it to look important." Eric's jaw tightened, but he refused to lose his composure. "Miss Thompson, I'm not interested in justifying my success to you. I've done nothing wrong, and I don't owe you any explanation." But Olivia wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her voice rising with every word. "You don't belong here. This is a decent neighborhood for decent people. Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" Eric's calm demeanor finally cracked, but not in the way Olivia expected. He let out a small, incredulous laugh and shook his head. "You have no idea what you're saying, do you? Ignorance like yours is why the world is the way it is." With that, Eric opened the car door and got in, closing it firmly behind him. Olivia stood there, fuming, as the engine roared to life. Eric backed out of the driveway and drove off without looking back. Olivia marched back to her house, slamming the door behind her. She felt an odd mix of anger and frustration. How could he be so calm, so confident? It infuriated her. Meanwhile, Eric drove to work, shaking his head at the encounter. He refused to let Olivia ruin his day, but he couldn't help but wonder what had made her so hateful. The tension between them had only just begun to simmer, and it was clear that Olivia wasn't done trying to make his life difficult. It was a quiet evening when Olivia's world turned upside down. She had just finished a work trip representing her company in a nearby city, and was driving back home when her car broke down on a lonely stretch of road. The sun had already set, and the silence of the night felt ominous. She was stranded and vulnerable, but things went from bad to worse when a gang of white men appeared out of nowhere. They robbed her of everything, her wallet, phone, and even the small bag she carried. "Please leave me alone," she begged, but they only laughed as they sped off in their truck, leaving her shaken and helpless. Desperate for help, Olivia stood by the side of the road, waving at passing cars, but none stopped. She felt a deep sense of despair. That was when a familiar black car slowed down and pulled over. The driver rolled down the window, and Olivia's heart sank. It was Eric. "Olivia," he said, surprised to see her. "What are you doing out here?" Olivia hesitated, feeling both embarrassed and desperate. I was robbed. They took everything, she admitted, her voice trembling. Eric stepped out of the car, concern written all over his face. Are you hurt? No, she whispered, looking down, unable to meet his gaze. I'm heading to my hotel, Eric said after a moment. I came to this city to inspect a property I just bought. If you'd like, I can give you a lift and help you get back home tomorrow. Olivia was stunned by his kindness. After all the hateful things she had said to him, here he was, offering her help without hesitation. She nodded reluctantly. Thank you, she said softly. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Olivia sat with her arms crossed, feeling a mix of embarrassment and guilt. She couldn't understand why Eric would help her after how she had treated him. When they arrived at the hotel, Eric checked them in and handed her a room key. Are you hungry? He asked. She nodded. Eric ordered food and handed her a plate when it arrived. Eat. You'll feel better, he said with a gentle smile. After dinner, Eric headed to the bathroom to take a shower. When he came out, he looked at the bed and then at Olivia. You can have the bed. I'll sleep on the floor, he said, grabbing a pillow and a blanket. Olivia shook her head. No, the bed is big enough. You don't have to sleep on the floor. Eric hesitated, but eventually agreed. They lay on opposite sides of the bed, but the air between them was thick with tension. Eric, Olivia said softly after a few moments. Yes. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. For everything I said. For the way I treated you. Eric turned to face her. I appreciate the apology, he said sincerely. But why did you hate me so much? You don't even know me. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. I don't know. I think I was just raised to think that way. But it was wrong. I see that now. You didn't deserve any of it. Eric smiled gently. People can change, Olivia. It's never too late to do better. Moved by his forgiveness, Olivia reached out and touched his hand. Their eyes met, and before she knew it, she leaned closer. Eric didn't pull away. Their lips met in a soft, hesitant kiss, which quickly deepened into something more passionate. One thing led to another, and soon they were wrapped in each other's arms. Olivia had never experienced anything like it before. The way Eric touched her, the way he made her feel, it was beyond anything she had ever known. It was tender, yet intense, leaving her breathless and exhilarated. When it was over, they lay side by side, the room filled with a peaceful silence. Olivia turned to Eric, her eyes shining with emotion. Thank you, she said. Not just for helping me tonight, but for showing me what I've been missing. I've been so wrong about everything. Eric smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. It's never too late to change, Olivia. What matters is what you do from now on. From that night, Olivia's heart softened. She saw Eric in a new light. Not as a stranger, not as someone different, but as a man who had shown her kindness when she least deserved it. As their relationship grew, Olivia couldn't help but think about something her friend had once said. When you go black, you never go back. She had laughed it off back then, but now she understood. Eric and Olivia began dating, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. For Olivia, it wasn't just about love. It was about learning, growing, and letting go of the hatred that had once consumed her. Eric's patience and kindness had changed her life, and she was determined to make the most of their future together.